Welcome, everyone, to another episode of the Rodcast. I'm sitting here with Pastor Rod, and today we are talking about social media. And obviously, social media is amazing. It's very powerful. There's lots of good things that come with that. And there also are some challenges. And we want to get into some of those today and maybe how we can overcome them. But maybe first off, Pastor Rod, how do we feel about social media, as Christians? How do you feel for our church and personally even?
Well, it's a big part of our world now, isn't it? Every generation, older, my generation and younger, have to navigate this incredible
Mm,
tool for either good or ill, but it's with us, and we need to navigate it, have some philosophies or views as parents or as pastors. It's a big subject. I think we'll deal with some of that today. But how do I feel about it? I think it's a gift. I think it's a gift to the body of Christ for us to be able to get out across the world to people who have no access to church or a Christian. They can hear the gospel. They can see something positive. Local church can use it. Most of our people coming, as you know, come through some form of social media.
mm,
So it's an incredibly positive tool. And it's also fun to, for me, I post a lot of shots of my family and really nice people in our life and keep a record of that. It's our modern photo album,
mm.
isn't it? So
Yeah.
we're not storing photo albums. We've got it on our phone. So a lot of great stuff there, and but there is that downside that I think we're going to come to in a bit.
Yeah. So when it comes to maybe the downsides of whether that's overusing it and the different ways that can impact young people, maybe older people, kids, what have you seen? What have you seen there in Japan? I mean, you've been there now for 20 years,
Yeah,
and I guess when you came, there was no social media.
there was no
Uh,
social media.
so
Yeah.
how has that impacted, I guess, the people that you're reaching there in the church? And
Yeah, I think every pastoral leader have seen these seasons actually of social media. So when we first came, the first 6 years, there was no iPhone, so it was all the flip top phone, the turtle back. I think they called it in
I
Japan.
had one of those in Tokyo.
And the big advance then was text. It was like, whoa, text is amazing. And then the iPhone came in and it was expensive, and then everyone has access almost everywhere in the world, even poorer countries. They've got an
Mm,
iPhone or a Samsung or a local brand. So that's seasons of change, and
mm,
therefore it means
big
how old are
change.
you to in your season? What was your experience? So my experience as an older person is no technology. Grew up with no technology. Your experience is probably hybrid. It
Yeah.
came in more and more through your young adult years, and so you
Hmm.
were, and you're quite good at techie stuff, Richard. So you probably were an early adopter.
Hmm.
But others in your generation were late adopters, or some not even good adopters, accept
Yeah.
what is essential. I think that's the thing about your generation. You learnt what was essential,
Hmm.
and maybe a bit more. And then there's a new generation that really grew up just on, as 2-year-olds, they were given an iPad.
Yeah.
Um, uh, recently we were in a dinner where people with their lovely little daughter gave them an actual picture book. It was in the restaurant. There was a picture book, and the little girl was trying to touch the photo of the picture book and trying to turn a page by touching the photo, and was very confused. And we all laughed, and I thought, well, that's really an interesting picture of a generation that will not know life without this.
Mm,
So really, this is truly, the Gen X, and then millennials and Gen Z and sub Gen Z. I don't even know what's that called. Is going to be very different, and we've got to understand it both as parents and as leaders. The impact on each other's lives. So the question you asked was, what have I seen? I've seen generational shifts, and it's happening faster. And I've even heard
right.
like Gen Z. You can't even talk about Gen Z. It's Gen Z first part, Gen Z second part now, and that those under Gen Z, which would be, I guess, 12 to 16-year-olds. I guess I don't know that, but I think as pastors and leaders, we've got to see the change. Talk to our kids, church leaders. Talk to our parents. My kids are young adults; they're not teenagers. You've got young kids. I think we
Mm,
need to be asking questions. and keeping abreast of this as pastors and church leaders, so that we understand the challenges, the blessings and the challenges. But definitely, it's got faster. There's more data. There's more views. They're seeing more things, both good and bad. It's just the world we live in. So I don't think we can go back. No one's talking about going back, but
No.
I think we need to manage the years and the seasons as parents and leaders. I don't know if that's an answer, but it's complex.
Well, when I think about technology and where it's going, and virtual reality and all this kind of stuff that's coming in, it seems like we're only going to be more interconnected, and so yeah,
Yeah.
it's not going back, but it's shooting forwards.
Yeah. And how old are your little guys, your boys?
I got 6, 5, 5, and 3.
So you're gonna be dealing with some of that in the next few years.
Mhm.
It's amazing to think that you're going to have to bring in actual family guidelines, family rules, actually, because you're a parent and with young kids, and you can bring in rules. But as they get older, it needs to be more managed. But you're going to go through that, and so it's actually good for you to talk to other parents of maybe a bit older kids, or I'm sure your kids have got access to some sort of screen right now. And so whether it's a protection on it, or it's you guide them, or whatever it is, there needs to be parental authority in the house, not just letting them have hours on their phone alone, and they'll get to even some bad stuff just by chance or by advertising. Like, my goodness, they advertise to you, and if you don't have there to say, press the button, skip ad, your little kids can see a silly ad or a bad ad. Well, that's another whole thing, right? The YouTube and these ads coming on, like
we had to pay for premium to get rid of all that stuff.
Totally.
Yeah.
I remember about 10 years ago when everything was Twitter was the big one before Facebook, believe it or not. And I had a Twitter account, and there was no ads. And all of a sudden, they brought in ads. That was about 2010, I think. Someone will correct me. And then I got a bad ad. Like, what on earth? I didn't even, I wasn't expecting an ad at all. And it came on and it was a bad ad. And I actually unfollowed Twitter until I realized there was a way to do premium and get rid of the ads. And then I went back on, although I only use it now for news. But it was a shock because it was a new protocol for that company. And it's the same with all the platforms. They bring in their own rules, and you get an update sometimes, and there's 28 pages. It says, "Do you agree?" And I don't know anyone that reads all that and then agrees. Like, we just agree, and for good or bad, that's just the way it's hidden in there, right? So, it's an interesting one. But I think for you, your little boys, you'll be learning again, and you'll be teaching me, because I'll be asking you, what do you do with 6 years old or 8 years old? So I think as a movement, we need to keep. It's actually a really good discussion for the kids' church and for parents to tell us what have you discovered, what's happening. Not to be like anything's wrong. We just need to understand the shifts that are occurring. And I think when we talk about teenagers, that's even more so, because they're less supervision and more peer group pressure to conform, which we'll talk about in a minute. But that is a real shift. And then young adult years, I guess habits are formed for life for many people. So my answer, I think we just need to keep abreast, keep alert, learn, talk to parents, help parents. We're not talking about scolding anyone. We're just saying, let's have discussions so we can have a more meaningful, because as I said at the beginning, this is not going away. It's just got to be managed, I guess is a word, right?
And it's uncharted territory too. It's like there's no playbook for this.
No. And I think right at the beginning, when it came in, we're also super positive about everything. Wow, we get to, and now we realize there are pitfalls that we must both understand and share with others, because there are a lot of studies now coming out showing that from 2012, where everyone had I think it was, I've seen statistics like it went from like only 1/4 to almost like 80-90% of young people had access to a smartphone.
Yeah.
The price came down and everyone wanted one, and there was other manufacturers, and all of a sudden everyone was on. It was a shift. I think that's the time people talk about, isn't it? 2010 to 2012. And the shift came in that people's mental health was affected, definitely, by certain factors. I think you've been watching some podcasts about that, haven't you?
Yeah, we've just Pastor Rod and I have just looked at some research around social media and the rise of smartphones, and basically it showed some charts about increase in self-harm, increase in depressive, I don't know, just depression and its effects, particularly with young people, and then particularly with girls, like girls even more so. It was like really some sad statistics around that and the rise of it, and also even people who are on social media longer each day being more sad. I've seen statistics around that as well. Yeah. So what do you think about that? Like how do we help young people who maybe who don't see the dangers there or some of the potentials for it to affect their development?
If we talk about like parenting, people in our household, I do think parents need to really understand the age and stage. It's like other things. There needs to be parental discussion or understanding. And I think with the littlies like you guys, it's just we do this, we don't do that. But I think as they get older, there needs to be
I feel like
explanation.
that age is a bit easier. Yeah. I feel like the teenagers are the challenge.
Sure. I remember when my boys were your age and they thought I was perfect. It was a great age. and then they realized Dad wasn't perfect as they got older. But it was a great age. And I used to beat them at every video game for a while until they got older. Yeah, it's a good time. But I do think that the strategies need to be in there. For example, how many hours are they on it?
Right, yeah.
Is it taking the place of other things such as social activity or even homework? So I think you're talking about teenage years, but I think it starts with little guys and girls.
Right, okay.
It's the same with anything, with parenting. You really, by the time they reach 12, they're a lot more influenced by their social group. It's a shift, whether it's the year in school or their puberty or whatever it is, but there's a shift, and it moves from daddy and mummy's word to their friends, what they think. So if you haven't given any guidelines before the 12 and you start bringing them in, it's a harder road. I'm not saying you can't do it. It's just a harder road. So we would suggest, Viv and I would suggest, with planning guidelines, whenever, bring in some guidelines through the years and increase the explanation as they get older. The why starts to come in. Even 8 and 9, they need to know the why. Not deep meanings, but just because dad, mum say no because this will affect, blah blah. So that happens. If at age 12 the parent starts to try and bring in guidelines, it's a harder road. I've already said that, but you can do it, parents, and I think that we need to do it. We need to take authority in our house that our children are not ruling this area. And they're off in their room for 4 hours every night, and you don't talk to them and see them and know what they're doing. I think that's you're actually you don't know your children so much anymore. And I think that we do have that responsibility to help them have guidelines, because sometimes if people in those years and this there was a video we both saw, Richard, by a Dr. Jonathan Haidt, I think his name was, very interesting stats, saying in the teenage years specifically, mental health is directly connected, especially with girls, to social media. And in there, he was saying that boys move to other things that are, we have to also bring, guidelines such as game time. And then there's also the problem of pornography comes in, that we need to absolutely bring in structures and teaching and even, on their phone to make sure that they're not getting access to that stuff. And once again, advertising comes in and you think, whoa, how did they get into our house? But it does. So we need to explain. And then, but for girls, it seems like it was a lot harder, wasn't it? That the doctors' research that girls in the teenage years were much more likely to affect each other through social relationships, competition, self love or self loathing, comparisons, competitiveness, and I think this is the area that we must help people really in the church to know that their identity doesn't come through that. Their identity comes through their family and God and what God says. And yes, there are friends there to navigate as well.
Actually, I do have one quote from that doctor, and he said this. He said, I can see no way to fix Instagram for minors. Any platform that encourages children to upload photos of themselves to be rated and commented on by strangers is likely to harm many kids.
Wow. I didn't get that far into that. Could you
that's
say
off his
part of that?
that's off his Twitter feed, but yeah, let me read it again.
Yeah.
I can see no way to fix Instagram for minors. Any platform that encourages children to upload photos of themselves to be rated and commented on by strangers is likely to harm many kids.
Wow. And he's the doctor. He's the researcher that talks about, here's the stats, here's the situation. And then you're looking for him to say, well, what do we do? And he says he knows no solution. Well, I think that's what we're talking about, parenting. Trying to parent kids towards the why, and they hit those years and we've got some structure and things about purpose and who you are and who God made you and loving good social contacts and making sure the kids, people they're connecting with, are positive people. We had no daughters. We've got two boys. But, if I had a daughter, I think we'd really be talking a lot about that. How, you're beautiful, you're wonderful, you're God's design, you're exactly what God wanted. And when you start seeing comparisons, I know you're exactly, and that's a bit simplistic. I know it's difficult and deep, but I think that's where it has to start, and really driving into how wonderful and beautifully made we are. There's that great Psalm 139, where King David says, "I know I was made in my mother's womb, and I'm wonderfully and beautifully made," which almost sounds like narcissism, like as an adult to say that. But right. I think it's positive to see through the eyes of God's creation, that we teach our boys and girls, you are made beautifully. You're exactly what God wanted. And yes, we all have flaws. We all maybe wish we had something else. Maybe I wish I had more athletic ability or whatever. Right now, I wish I had more hair. I'm glad I got married early before the hair went. But we've all got flaws. We haven't got perfect skin. But you are absolutely the image, made in the image of God, boys and girls, and loved deeply by God. And we've just got to keep saying that to our kids. Hey, I know you do that with your boys. Hey, tell me. Even little boys, what's your some of the things you say to your boys, like affirmations?
Yeah, right. I'd call them champions all the time.
Yeah.
And obviously we just say I love you to them every day.
Yeah.
And that they're smart, because they are. They're actually very sharp, all four of them. And yeah, just. I don't know. You got to look for opportunities to encourage them. So when they do well in something, when they're funny, we encourage that. Like we've got some kids that are funnier than others, and the more entertainers of the family, and then others are more thinkers and very creative. And so we're encouraging what they're doing, their behavior, encourage them when they help each other.
Yeah.
Just yesterday, one of my boys won a prize at school, and he gave it to his friend, and because his friend liked it, and he was generous, and so we really encouraged him.
It's great.
Yeah.
Well, keep doing it, because that's what we did too all through our years. I remember when Monty my eldest boy, when he was little, love you, Monty, every night, love you, prayed, God, bless Monty. And when he got older, I can't remember what age it was. Maybe it was like 10 or something. I can't remember. I think he remembers it. He said to me, and I said, Monty, we love you. And he said, oh, Dad, you always say that. And I said, do you want me to stop saying it? And he stopped, like for about, I don't know, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And he said, no, you keep telling me. And
Yeah, you can't overdo that one.
no. And say to the girls, you're special and you're beautiful, and God made you. And I think that's our parental responsibility. Some people here in Japan say we don't say things like that, and I say, well, I think it's a habit we need to form to be, yes, affirm with hands and loving and arm around, but affirming with words are very important about this area. Like you are wonderful, wonderfully made, just like King David said there. Psalm 139. Everyone read it. It's amazing. I think when they hit teenage years, we have to establish that in them. Then when they start seeing competitiveness, which they will, and they'll see parties where they're not invited, and there'll be the football team that they weren't invited to that barbecue, and we start seeing this comparison and being left out of things, and we need to help build self-esteem at those times. And if a lot of it's just is going to be there, it's like no one has a bad intent.
Yeah.
And we just need to explain, hey, you can't be popular with everyone, or who are your real friends? Let's talk about that. But if something's actually really pointed over and over, like you're not invited to this, I think we have to then talk about what are we watching? What are you? Who are you following? Because sometimes people do that for their own, make themselves feel better, and we just have to help bring guidelines and balance. I think when I grew up, there was none of this stuff, and I think if I knew there was parties I weren't invited to, and there was football barbecues I weren't invited to, I would feel worse. But I didn't know, right? I just didn't know, but now you do. That is a new world. That is a really new thing that we have to help our teenagers through. That you don't have
FOMO?
To be friends.
Fear of missing out?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a new concept, right? Because back then we just didn't know we were missing out.
Yeah.
Unless someone told us, we just didn't know. And of course, we weren't looking at a phone all the time. We were out doing more outdoor activities and probably getting healthy in some other ways. But I think we have to help people understand this, that social media, some people are mean. There's movies about that, right? And some people are just mean and really is that the
and
sort
a
of
lot
friend?
more mean online than they would be in person too.
Yeah.
So it's amplified.
Yeah. And hence that the doctor's quote there, I don't know what to do about it. Well, I think we as parents need to have a big part in that. And then let me come to, like university students, young adults that come into the church or come into our sphere, that we can't treat them like children, nor do we try. But we might need to help them get habits that they never learned. Because as young adults come in, we do see this, where people are deeply affected by not being invited to something, or that they're not good enough or whatever. And I think we do have to teach as a church that you need to choose your friends wisely, and you need to choose what you watch wisely. Not legalistic, like we're going to help you, but you need to have some restrictions or guidelines. And, if I see things that I don't need, that make me feel lesser, I need to think about that. Did I need to see that? Or do I see it often? And actually make decisions about who I'm following, or how I'm following, or how that makes me feel, or thinking through that. So as young adults, we do talk to people about habits. And again, let me say the church does not bring in guidelines or rules, but we must teach philosophy of life, that life is about your daily habits. And I was just talking to one of our pastors the other day, and he said, have you ever got onto that app that shows you how many hours you spend on each app every week? And I said, no. And he said, it's shocking. It's shocking for him to look and see which apps he used for how many hours every week. So that's just habit. I don't think we think too much about that. It's just the whole thing of just picking up the phone, isn't it? This is the habit. It's just all the time, and so you go somewhere, and it's just all on this. I was here in Japan. I had to get my license renewed every 3 years, and I just did it. And there's a 2-hour lecture sometimes you have to go to,
Right.
and a whole 100 people in a hall, and there's 10 halls, so that's 900 people, 1,000 people all doing this. And in my room,
Japanese only, right?
yeah,
I think I
in
did
Japanese
that
only,
before.
yeah.
Yeah.
And half the room was actually asleep, and half them were on their phone, and a few were looking at that. But here's a lecture, a formal lecture to get your license, and everyone was on their phone. And I just think that I'm talking about the habit. I'm just talking about the habit that we are the phone in hand generation. And what are you looking at? Or what apps are you looking at, or what? And if stuff makes you feel bad, and here's my point, stuff makes you feel bad, I think you need to analyze that and say, is that helpful? Is that what I should be seeing? Personally, make decisions about good habits. You got any thoughts on that for young adults? Or
Yeah, I do, because I've been experimenting with this myself. And one thing that I tried doing was I felt like I was going to Instagram at any moment where there was I had a minute spare, in an elevator or whatever. And I just felt that it was too much. And so I moved the Instagram app from my home screen. So it's still on my phone, but I hid it, and it just made it a few more screens to go through. And it's amazing. Even that changed how often I used it.
Yeah.
So just a very practical thing like that. But then also I think other things is what you were talking about with monitoring how you feel as you consume something. So what am I feeding on?
yeah,
And there's mute features on some of those apps that I wasn't using. I was just following, I don't know, all my friends or whatever in my world. And I think, yeah, sometimes the mute button is good.
yeah. I would agree with
maybe even
that.
for a season.
I think the mute button, if you're not aware of it on Instagram, is a great button to investigate. You're still their friend, but you're not seeing their live feed all the time, but you can interact. And I think that doesn't mean I think it's really important. We're not rejecting people. It's really important, because here in Japan, that's a big deal. Are you rejecting someone on your social media? And it's not rejecting. It's just sort of putting on hold until I'm ready. And we're still friends. We're all good.
Well, that's the difference: the mute versus the unfollow, right?
Yes.
Yeah, there is something. It's significant to people.
And I think people are only really discovering the mute button still. I discovered it a couple of years ago, and I think some people don't know about it. It is really good, and it gives you control of what you're seeing when you do look at your feed. But like you said, I think that putting it away or not look physically, a new habit. I'm not going to look every minute or every spare minute, or I'm not going to look at those 100 different people when I do, which is that's a lot of time. I think it's really important. I just want to bring in a Bible verse. I've been thinking about this Bible verse since we planned on talking about this, Richard. It's from 1 Timothy 4:8, and Paul is writing to Timothy, a pastor, about a gymnasium. Now, the gymnasium in their days was different than today, but it was really like a big club, and it was like a social thing. It was more than just lifting weights. Like today, you go to the gym and you often do your own thing. But the gym in Paul's day was very much a social place, maybe a club. They think club. And he's saying here about value of habits. And verse 7 says, rather train yourself to be godly. For physical training, that's the Bible word gymnasium. It is actually that word in the Greek. For gymnasium is of some value, but godliness has value for all things. And so again, it's this thing of balance. And this is probably where I think we need to maybe end this somehow is social media is a balance, isn't it? Who you watch, who you don't, how long, how not. what your kids, different ages, stages. It's going to be about balance. And what Paul is saying here is, hey, don't get stuck into the gymnasium so much it affects your personal life, affects your godly life, affects your value, affects your future, your vision, your purpose. And we start to bring in bigger words. And Paul here is not saying don't go to the gymnasium. He's just saying in the balance of all things, put godliness and purpose above your gymnasium. And so I would say the same for us. And a teaching word here is to put your purpose and your values and your true friendships above social media. Use social media, but it's not the boss of me and the boss of you. Well, that's the way I see it. So let me read it again. That training yourself to be godly. Where do you want to go in life? What's your goals? So I am talking to young adults here now as we sort of finish high school as young adults, and even people in the 30s and 40s, even up to my age, is godly values are more important than social media. Social media should remain a tool. It will help build businesses for many people, but it's still a tool, and it's not the boss. The boss is God. He designed us, created us for one life to do great things for him, build a great marriage, great home for kids, great friendships, love the local church, do great things for God. That's the values that should be above. And if social media gets out of whack and becomes higher than that, I would just say to people, it's going to affect your life goals. Yeah. It will eventually affect self-esteem and may affect your life goals. You may waste years. And as a pastor over 35 years, I've seen many people say to me, I wish I had made those decisions when I was 25 or 28 or 35. You hear that a lot. I wish I had made better decisions because it's affected the rest of my life. And I would say to anyone right now, you have the chance right now to affect the rest of your life. I'm sort of preaching right now, aren't I? But anyway, I think it's good. Going out, godliness has value for all things. Purpose has value for all things. Social media has value for some things. So just like Paul's day, gymnasium, is it wrong? No. Do I stop going? No. It's just the balancing of putting the big things first every day. And we do that through journaling and reading the word and praying and good friendships and church and worship and just keeping godly values above social media. So that was my big preach.
That's great. I think it's a great place to end it. And wishing everyone here can grow in this area of wisdom in our use of social media. Thanks, Pastor Rod.
Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you enjoyed today's episode with Pastor Rod, why don't you subscribe on whatever platform you are listening to this, and we'll see you next time.